Welcome
It
to the show.
was. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You kicked me out, and then Zoom said I wasn't allowed back in.
I'm
So,
sorry about that. Well, thank you for joining us. We're very excited to have you. Can you give us a little breakdown of the last 2 days you've been on a debate tour? Which debates do you think you've won? Where's your weakest talking point
No,
that I can needle you
and
on?
we were joking earlier. Hopefully, this is the most enjoyable podcast experience that you have this week, because I know some of them got a little contentious.
A little feisty.
So it's great to have you.
yeah, it's been fun. I pray to God I did not lose a debate to a Bitcoin bro. So at that point, I'm just committing suicide and hanging it up.
You did go in the
so
lion's den with that one.
yeah, no, actually, I would say the most interesting conversation we just posted, which was yesterday with Derek Thompson from The Atlantic, who
Yeah.
co-wrote the Abundance book with Ezra Klein, which I
Yeah.
think is a great book, and we mostly agree on 70% of the things, and some of the stuff we didn't agree with at the end, and we got to both, which was really nice. So that has been fun. It's funny, like the reason I started to do it is because these topics, tariffs,
Yeah.
pie grilling, like these are not interesting topics to the vast majority of Americans day to day. Like they don't care about this stuff
Yeah.
until right now.
Yep.
And so I was like, all right, fuck it. Let's go have a conversation about things that like I'm interested in and I think are important for America. But normally, the audience was like, my family.
Yeah.
So that's part of why I was doing it, and still am. I have a few more next week actually, just to try to make sense of what's going on in this really complicated economic concepts, for like normal people. That's been my goal. So it's been fun. It's been fun.
Are you abundance pilled at this point? Because I was listening to something about Ezra Klein talking about how he was very like inspired by West Wing, and the abundance movement feels very aspirational, but there's always this question of like when the rubber meets the road, can the impact of that actually not just be rhetoric?
To me at a base level,
Yeah.
it's an amazing positioning.
Yep.
Like coming at it
It's
from
a huge
abundance.
upgrade
'Cause, like
from
I
the
saw
previous platform.
even yesterday there
Yeah.
was somebody in San Francisco that was saying we should tax Waymo to fund public transit, and then somebody was quoting it and being like, basically like, the idea is like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, why don't we just make Waymo so cheap that everybody can use it?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
just
yeah.
an abundance of, autonomous
Yeah, yeah,
cars
yeah.
that everyone has access to.
By the way, you do tax Waymo already.
Yeah.
It is
When
taxed.
you're like, welcome to how this works already, guys. It's just that you're real shitty at building public transport. Like that's the problem. It's not the Waymo tax. By the way, Waymo loses like $1 billion a year. Like they're
Yeah, it
already
is
handing you
subsidized.
money.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I mean, what is your read on abundance? Not just, I mean, obviously give me like do you like the framing, but then also, is it a meaningful shift from just rhetoric, it will win the election, or it will actually have meaningful change if it is implemented?
I love the concept because it gets the Democrats in particular, but America talking about growth. And talking about how growing the pie and making the pie bigger is better for everybody. And then as a Dem or as like a left-leaning person, when you want to talk about how the pie is allocated, which is about taxes and redistribution and social programs and all of that, those are cool conversations to have when the pie is really big. When the pie is really small and you think of it in this like fixed mentality, then you get into these awful debates of like you assume everybody that there's only $1 to go around, but in reality there's way more dollars if you grow. And so I love that framing. It brings us back to Clinton, not Hillary, but like Bill back in the
Yeah.
day, right? This is the kind of stuff that they were talking about. This is why I think the Dems, were a great political party, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that part I agree with. I think it's great. The other thing I think they touched on that I love is that abundance actually matters a lot more in a few specific categories. Like abundance is not created equal. And in particular, housing. That housing is kind of like the only thing that really matters in the long run for most people because it is such a large percentage of everybody's income. Either as a homeowner because of the mortgage or obviously as a renter. And like, sure, you can complain about grocery prices, but the reason you care so much about the movement in grocery prices is because housing is eating up 50% of your income.
Mhm.
And so like go get the big thing and then the little things will matter a lot less. So I really like that positioning as well. I think they nailed the like problem in America is really housing costs, and other stuff matter, but not as much. Healthcare is probably the second. Where we disagree, and we had this little fun little disagreement on it, is what is the role of government in creating that abundance?
Mhm.
And where do you need government to do stuff, such as building roads and providing, health insurance through Medicare and Medicaid, through like, construction of energy infrastructure and things like that, military. And where do you need government to get the fuck out of the way?
Mhm.
Because government is the thing holding us up, and rules and regs that prevent the free market and from capitalism from building the homes, right?
Mhm.
And there's just a lot of nuance, I think, of like where government should and shouldn't be involved. And so their book is a little bit more like make government good at its job.
Mhm.
And my view on that is like, I don't really think that's ever going to happen. And so for a variety of reasons. And so there are some places where we actually need to get the government out of the process, and that will help. And it just depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about like, bridges and tunnels and highways? Are you
Mhm.
talking about homes? Are you talking about semiconductor manufacturing? And we disagree on some of the specifics there, but the goal is noble and good and way better than what we have been talking about for the last 10 years, which is like, I don't even know what we've been talking about. It's been a disaster.
I agree. Yeah, that's a good point. Uh,
So.
I want to get to tariffs. How did you? I mean, like, take me on the roller coaster of emotion that you went through over the past week with regard to Liberation Day and the fallout from it.
Yeah, and then we can get to the art of the squeal.
Yeah, the art of the
which has
squeal.
been,
We want to talk about.
which has been the talk of the timeline today.
I have no idea what that is, but interested in learning more. Uh, you know, like because I work day to day in biotech and in healthcare, but specifically in biotech,
Mhm.
and in early stage biotech, which is before a drug is approved, right? This is all drug discovery. The tariff stuff doesn't really impact us on a day to day basis.
Mhm.
And so, from like a professional side of things, it's interesting to watch and be interested in it because, tax revenue helps fund science. So I'm
Mhm.
very interested in growing the economy because it'd be nice for us to have more money to fund more science. That's really my big interest in this, right? Like if America were 10 times richer, then the NIH budget would be 10 times bigger. And you know how much cool shit we would discover as like humanity if the NIH budget was 500 billion instead of 50 billion? Like that's pretty cool. I think it's like 30 billion. Uh, and so that's why I'm really interested in this stuff because I think, as members of society today and our kids, we benefit from a booming US economy in ways that are not always clear. And one of them is in science and in drug discovery. So that's part of why I'm interested in this stuff because I think it's bad for America if we don't grow. But
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis, it hasn't impacted us. Now, there are other things going on in the administration related to healthcare, as I'm sure you've seen with, RFK and the FDA that we pay a lot more attention to, and they're very nuanced biotech specific problems, which, needs a lot of context to share.
Yeah.
Um,
With
but
regard to the NIH, why is that $30 billion budget so important? Why, we like DARPA created the internet, but
right,
the free market and venture capital in Silicon Valley is like, well, they kind of took it from there, right? Why hasn't that
yeah.
happened in biotech? Why do we need the government doing anything? Why can't they just kind of get out of the way? And, kid in the lab, with his ChatGPT looking it up, formulate something and they test it, and then the government may be still there to approve it, but it moves a lot faster.
I knew this question was coming because I get
Yeah.
asked it all the time, and I was trying to come up with like a simple way to understand where you need and where you don't need government
Mm-hmm.
in biotech. So I'm going to try my best.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make the distinction between biology,
Mm-hmm.
which is the understanding of how the body works,
Mm-hmm.
versus drugs. You can think of it as chemistry, but it's more than chemistry now, which is creating something, a pill, an injection, mRNA, siRNA, whatever. There's a lot of different things you can make to change that biology. Right? One is like, I want to, this is a thing that's going wrong in the body. I want it to do more. I want it to do less. That is biology. And then there's the like, I got to now create something that doesn't naturally happen in your body or isn't happening to make an impact on disease. And those are two different things. Those are two very, very different things. Biology, you cannot patent. There is no patent for understanding, a process that happens in your cells or happens in, your immune system, right? Like you got to remember, I think people think we know more about how the human body works than we do. We barely understand how this thing works. I mean, we have a little bit of like, we understand, how to like sequence DNA and how DNA creates RNA and how RNA sometimes creates proteins. Like we have some basic level understanding of this stuff. But it is an incredibly complex system that if you don't understand how it works, you can't even start a drug program in the first place because what are you pointing it to? What are you trying to drug? And that I think is really, really important because there is mostly no business model in finding new biology. Like learning how a certain type of cell works or how cell communication works. Like you can't make money doing that. And it is really, I mean, like, yes, some rare cases, sure, but you really can't.
So the solution is to do like a DAO or something like that.
I mean,
owned, admit it. Crypto is the solution.
Sorry, I don't want to trigger you. I know you were triggered.
No, it's good. It's good.
No, I'm kidding.
And so like, when people talk about academic discoveries and discoveries in the lab and government funded discoveries, and none of like, those are all true things.
Yeah.
But mostly what academics discover, mostly in this world, in my world, is biology, right? Ooh, this is how this thing works. This is how this process works, right? Like, and then private groups go and go, okay, now that I understand, this thing is causing a type of cancer, or this thing is causing cell signaling in a weird way, or this thing is causing Alzheimer's or dementia or some immune, condition. Now I'm going to try and make a drug to go and stop that thing from happening or modulate it down. And those drugs you can patent, right? And that's what creates an incentive for private business to go and take a massive amount of risk because most drugs fail and it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to figure out if they fail. But because you can patent those things, and then because that patent life is long enough and the prices on the other side of this are high enough that you can make money doing it. You could, it's not easy to make money. Let me be clear. So you need government to discover biology. Without it, it won't happen. And here's like there's a few examples of this that I'm going to try and make it tangible, but like, we do not know what causes Alzheimer's. We have no idea. I mean, we have some things that show up in the brains of Alzheimer's patients that seem wrong, right? And this is the whole like tau and, some of the best way to describe it. There are things in the brain of Alzheimer's and dementia patients that shouldn't be there. And so, okay, we're going to try and like remove those things from the brain, but we don't actually know what's causing those things to be there in the first place. And is that causing Alzheimer's? Is it driving the disease? Or is it actually a passenger? There's something else driving it over here, and that's causing this. What of these things do we try and drug? Right? Like, and this is like tau and beta amyloid and all these things that we think are kind of involved, but we don't actually know what causes Alzheimer's. We're not even close to understanding this. And so if you want good drugs for dementia and Alzheimer's in the future, we need to know what the hell is happening now. And without government funding that kind of biology research, we will never figure this out. And because there is no business really in doing that kind of lab work. It's open-ended science. This is where you need philanthropy and money that isn't chasing profit. And I'm the first person who will tell you capitalism is the greatest thing that ever happened to humanity. But there are some places where it doesn't work, and that's where there isn't profit to be made. And biology is really, really, really key.
Can you I wanted to get your thoughts on tariffs, specifically in the context of the pharmaceutical industry. Trump had come out this week and basically said that pharma is next, but if you actually look at the U.S.-China, there isn't a huge pharmaceutical trade imbalance between the U.S. and China. It seems like we buy a lot from them, they buy a lot from us. Should that even be a part of the conversation, or is it just a total distraction?
It's really, really stupid. And it's stupid it's even dumber than that, which is that the pharmaceutical product that you're manufacturing at the end of this is the approved drug. By the time you're at that point, all the hard stuff has kind of really been done, right? Which is figuring out what drug to make in the first place, how to design, how to develop it. All the risk, all the failures are in what happens before this, before the approval. And that's where all the money is made, right? All the money, all the stuff that is like strategic for the United States to be good at is in drug discovery and drug development. It is not drug manufacturing that matters, right? Like that is not the hard part. It's not easy, but like that's not the thing that we need to be doing in America. These are also like giant facilities. There's not a ton of people. It's really more of like quality control processes. It's actually better for us if we can build them elsewhere because it allows drugs to be slightly cheaper for Americans, right? Like I don't view drug manufacturing as strategic to the United States. Like someone's got to do it, but that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is drug discovery and drug development, which is really what our biotech and pharmaceutical companies, that's mostly what they're good at. Just because it's made in, Canada or Europe, I don't think really matters as long as the quality control, is there. So tariffing the last mile manufacturing is irrelevant. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Why do we need these things here? It's just going to make things more expensive. So it gets the problem wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk about AI in the context of the early stage investing that you're doing, drug development work that, the portfolio is doing? I did a Command F on your site, by the way. You don't mention AI at all, yet every time Sam Altman needs to raise another 10, 20 billion, the sort of like, the idea that LLMs are going to cure all disease seems to come up. So I'm curious to get your take on the opportunity generally. Because like our takeaway from this week is like, with all the potential of AI, it's sort of upsetting in many ways that we've had to kind of like, take this like detour down, trade war lane and,
I mean, at the same time, like when AlphaFold dropped, it was like the protein folding problem is solved. Biotech markets didn't really move. And I'm always wondered why there's such a disconnect there between like the hype around AI and bio versus what the market is saying. But maybe it's taking place at the early stage, but would love just the current rant on AI and biotech.
Okay. One of the hardest things to explain in a short period of time. The TLDR is like nice, cool tool in the toolbox, useful. We'll make a few steps of this process potentially more efficient. Not a panacea by any means. Why? Let's see if I can try to explain this. Making a drug is like a 40-step process that requires you to actually make early versions of like the physical molecule itself, right? Because just because the computer says do X, Y, and Z doesn't mean it's right? Like it's not software predictions where it makes you a picture and then you go, that picture. You have to go and make the thing that the computer is suggesting. If we're talking about, in this case, using AI for the drug making part of it, not the biology part. We can talk about biology in a second or differently. So you got to go think make, test, iterate cycle. And it's atoms. It's not bits. These are physical atoms. So you got to go and then you take that early version of the drug and you stick it in like a petri dish and you see what happens. And then you have to tweak it and you got to go make more of them. And you got to run this little loop. And then if that works to where you want, now you got to go stick it in a mouse. Which mouse? Does the mouse have the right model? Does the mouse predict a human? Which version? Is it a human? Like there's so many things. And then, okay, you get through the mouse, dog or monkey, right? Because because mice aren't people. Mice aren't people, right? And either dogs or monkeys, but they're closer to people, right? And so now you got to go do all that stuff. And so like, and then by the way, even after all of this, we've gotten through the petri dish and the mouse and the dog and the monkey, and then you go to the people. You still don't know if the drug works because you have to go like humans are weird, right? Biology is weird. We don't know how it works. You know, you stick it in. If it does everything right in the monkey, that doesn't mean it's going to work in the human. And so unfortunately, like there's just the data you would need to make all of these predictions. And then it's not just the predictions, you need the feedback loop, right? Like why is Scale AI a $20 billion business? Because you need a bunch of people clicking like, not the right picture, not the right picture, you need that loop for training. And you don't have that loop in biotech. You do not have that. You have to, the size of the data we're talking about here is like 1/1 billionth of what you can do in digital land, because in the digital world, your training data set is the history of every written word and picture ever in the history of humanity. Like think of the size of the training data. In biology, you don't have that. One other little nuance is your training, even where you do have training data, and there's different types of training data, depends what you're trying to predict. It's protein structure is one thing. A lot of that training data comes in a petri dish. Right? Like we're not when we think about like how a cell works and what's going on inside of it, we're not actually measuring and watching that cell in a real biological system, meaning like it's touching other cells and doing stuff. You're doing it in a petri dish, which is a piece of plastic. And like the way that cell works on a piece of plastic is not the same way that it tends to work could we tell you exactly what that difference is? No. And so you have some really big challenges in even just the quality of the training data if you want to use this to make high quality predictions. And so it's going to come off as I'm like super negative about all this, and I'm not. I think it's awesome that we have slightly better tools to make predictions about, you know, how to design a small molecule. That's really what this is particularly good at. But this idea that like a computer is designing a drug is so far from reality that's why you don't see the like the people who know and that's why it's not moving. It's great. It's cool. I'm glad we have it. It's not going to change the game. And part of this is like, not to finish my rant here. Yeah. If you don't understand the biology, what is the computer trying to predict? Right? Like all the way back to the thing we just, we talked about in the beginning. If we don't even know what causes a particular disease, what is the computer going to make for you? Right? Like, and so much of the problem of making drugs for the future, and there's so many challenges in all of this, and it's great that America is good at this, but like it is actually is in the biology side of things where, we need more science, we need more scientists, we need more smart scientists. So the idea
I think
of
it's a good it's not necessarily negative, but it's a good wake up call to the sort of EAC, super AGI pilled types that say, just survive the next 2 years and then we're all going to live forever, which is, I did want to ask specifically how you thought about the potential of even just base LLMs within healthcare. There was a study recently around how, basically LLM-based therapy was actually showing to have tremendous potential. And that's cool because the idea that everybody can get access to a, relatively high quality therapy effectively for free could have tremendous benefits. But I'm curious if you think AI can be deflationary within healthcare broadly outside of, drug discovery and development, things like that.
Probably not at a giant number, but there are some things that I think these LLMs will be particularly good at. I'm not going to talk about the boring part of healthcare, which is like insurance, reimbursement,
PDFs,
prior author, like paperwork.
Yeah.
I actually think LLM should be awesome on the paperwork side, and so things should get better. You should see things should be faster, more efficient. That'll be great. No more. You ever make an appointment with a doctor and like some front desk person is trying to call you 18 times? You're like, hey, have you ever heard of like a text message that I can confirm my appointment? Like that stuff should be solved,
Yeah.
hopefully. I think the other area that is really useful is in differential diagnosis, which is basically like the job of a doctor to try and figure out what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And part of that is understanding the science. And then part of that is like the literature that you have to, based on the symptoms that this person is talking about and telling you, like, what might it be? And that's probability weighted type analysis that, the docs do. And they try and rule stuff out. And a lot of that just comes from experience and education. And that should be replicable by models over time.
La-
I think that's getting better.
Do you have any specifically? One thing that I think is interesting is like seemingly like people are much more excited to get their biomarkers done, and there's services now that allow you to test a really broad range of biomarkers for seemingly less
Superpower
money
and
than
Function?
going. Yeah. Companies like Function and Superpower and others. Are you excited about just having a lot more data? And obviously it's like a snapshot in time, but that and data by itself is not valuable, but I imagine
That's it right there. You just hit it right there, which is like data by itself, just because you can measure it doesn't make it important. And just because it's going up or down doesn't mean it matters. And sometimes the data can be confusing and actually point you in weird directions that don't make sense because this biomarker that we think is important, we don't actually have great data to know whether it is. And, certain things can be elevated in your blood because of like the coffee you had in the morning. And it doesn't mean so. I think it's great that people are interested in their own health and interested in understanding what's going on in their body. I think the chances of like wide blood-based biomarker screening, like basically what Function does, actually mattering for the vast majority of people is probably not true. It's kind of like healthy neurotic people staying more healthy and neurotic. And things that really matter are much more for like people with chronic disease and cancer. Like that's really where like tech people have this really weird view of healthcare because tech people tend to be healthy. And like, that's not healthcare. That's not, I mean, it's healthcare, but that's not the healthcare that really matters, which is mostly like when you're older and sicker. And chronic disease is just, is a symptom of aging. And so I'm much more interested in how do you think about healthcare as it relates to disease rather than, these like biomarkers that don't necessarily tell you tons of things. The flip of it is, look, like every once in a while, it is going to catch something that matters, right? It's not never. It's just not frequent and often. There's also a risk in healthcare. I know I have to jump, but like there's always a risk in healthcare of finding something you think is going wrong, trying to figure that out, and while you are trying to figure it out, harming yourself. And a simple example of this is a biopsy, right? Like you go and get a scan and you got to remember it's a scan. It's not a detail. So like you see something in a scan, it could be an x-ray, it could be MRI, whatever. And it looks like, we have this like little nodule here. And so is it cancerous? Is it not? We don't know. So you have to go get a biopsy, which is like a giant needle, right? That you got to like stick into the whatever that thing is and pull out some cells and take a sample and then go test it. And like biopsies are not danger free. And you can hurt yourself, especially if it's in your like GI area, and especially if you're older, right? And the doc can do it incorrectly and you can have symptoms and complications. Doing more in healthcare is not always better. And I think that's really hard for people to understand, is like more is not always better, because diagnosis and treatment is not risk-free.
Except when
Yeah.
it comes to the NIH budget or NIH budget maxing over here.
Doing more
but-
healthcare services is not always better.
But
Doing
thank
more
you for
healthcare
joining. This
funding.
is a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate you. hopping
Yeah,
on the
let's do
stream.
this again soon.
We gotta do this
I
again soon.
probably
We could
have
go for a
40
long-
other questions.
Yeah, this was
but
fantastic.
thanks for joining.
Official
Anytime.
biotech correspondent. Thank
There
you.
you go. There you
Works
go.
for me.
We'll talk to you
guys.
soon. Bye.
Cheers.